2020, the phrase "a new normal" became very popular as the coronavirus took hold and we all felt the impact of a global pandemic. This new normal included social distancing, hand sanitizer and face masks, and as we all sought to keep ourselves and those around us safe. In his book, Grief and Grace, Tim speaks of grief leading us into a new abnormal. He says that there's nothing normal about living after someone we love has died. I'll let him explain more before we hear from Theo, who had to discover a new abnormal after his wife passed away. Over to you, Tim.
As I'm speaking to you now, the coronavirus, the global pandemic, is causing havoc and carnage around the world. These are difficult times. They are not normal times. And millions of people have been placed into what we've called facing the future they did not choose. When the pandemic began in 2020, there was a word, a really British word, English word, that for me summed up the feeling of what was happening around the world. One of my favorite English words, it was the word discombobulated. It just felt that everyone had this sensation of being discombobulated. It's the feeling of being confused or disconcerted. When facing a crisis, we can lose our sense of equilibrium. Everything that seemed normal, familiar, comforting, now seems out of sync. This is the battle for the mind, because being discombobulated can make us feel insecure or even panic-stricken. Have you noticed just the fear that has existed around the world over this past year? I believe is to be expected. Facing an unknown future is disorientating. And so it's not surprising that so many people are struggling with their mental health at this moment in time. See, that's how I felt after Laura died. Grief changes everything. I was discombobulated, facing a future I didn't choose, facing not a new normal, facing a new abnormal. The first Christian martyr in the New Testament of the Bible was a brave young man called Stephen. You may know the story in Acts. The religious establishment had become increasingly hostile to the growing band of Jesus followers in Jerusalem. It was only a matter of time before their antagonism would turn violent. And Stephen was sharing the message and preaching, and an angry mob started harassing him. They accused him of blasphemy, and they picked up stones to kill him. And as he looked his own killers in the face, Stephen was given an amazing vision of heaven. And even as the rocks piled into him and he breathed his last, he prayed that God would have mercy upon his attackers. How do we respond to a story like this? A young man like Stephen passing away in the prime of his life because of his faith. Is it a glorious triumph, or is it a tragic waste? The thing with death is that some Christians, we like to be, some people either want to ignore it or they want to be super spiritual about it. We come up with cliches and platitudes to explain it away. But that wasn't the response of the early church to Stephen's death. There's an amazing verse in Acts 8, verse 2. Even in their state of being what I would see as being discombobulated, we see this expression. Acts 8, verse 2, godly men buried Stephen and mourned deeply for him. They mourned deeply for him. It's even more incredible when you think not only had they lost their good friend and one of their leaders, Stephen, also persecution now was breaking out against other Christians at that time. It was dangerous days for them. There was chaos. But another version of the Bible says the same verse in a different way. It says, devout men buried Stephen and made great lamentation over him. The early church, they didn't hide away their grief. They didn't try and super spiritualize it. Rather, they faced it head on. The Amplified Version now says, some devout men buried Stephen and mourned greatly over him. It explains it this way: expressing a personal sense of loss. In other words, these young people who were mourning the loss of Stephen, this early church, they were discombobulated and facing a new abnormal life without Stephen, life in danger. And I love this. I love the Bible expresses this to us because it humanizes for us the biblical characters. Their new abnormal was not just life without Stephen, but now their own lives were in danger. And we see in the following verses that they had to scatter to many cities. However, they continued to keep the faith. And this was their anchor in their new abnormal. Just as we saw with Job last week, we cannot gloss over the pain of loss that we experience. We cannot gloss over or simply ignore the fear that we will face when we're facing a new abnormal. We need to recognize it for what it is. It's daunting and it is difficult. In my journal, I wrote the following to express this. I was writing in my journal about the first day I went back into work after Laura passed away. I wrote this: that was a hard thing about going into work on Thursday. It felt abnormally normal. There was joy in the place, and it was good to see everyone. I take great pleasure in what God has done through us at The Message. It felt like it always has. Laura and I loved being part of The Message, and I loved going to work, and I was happy being there on Thursday. But part of the old normal of work was coming home to Laura, talking to her, and being in this together. That's why we loved what we did so much. It was something we'd birthed together and a foretaste of the future we were anticipating. Our normal life was to be centered on missions, on Africa, on the poor and marginalized. And my pleasure in thinking on that future was that we were going to be together in those things. My normal life revolved around my shared experiences with Laura. And in those shared experiences, I found joy and meaning in the good and bad times. And I want to resist a new normal that doesn't have that. I want to fight against it. And yet I know I'm moving towards it because that's the nature of time. Part of my saving grace in the new abnormal was my 3 children. Not only did we share the sense of loss together, but I simply had to take care of them, to get up each day, to see that they got dressed, to put food on the table. This was the anchor God provided for me in my new abnormal. The children still needed to be fed, looked after. I needed to find schools for them because Laura had been homeschooling them. We went together to watch movies, to the beach. We had a holiday together. And I began to discover her new motto for my life. It was based on the cheesy 1990s WWJD bracelets. Maybe you have to be as old as me to remember those things. WWJD stood for What Would Jesus Do? Well, I changed it to WWLD, What Would Laura Do? And I faced each day with that question as I sought to care for my children. My kids helped me face new challenges. I had to attend ballet lessons with my daughter. I had to organize play dates. I had to take my daughter to get her beautiful hair done. For Stephen's friends, it was their mission and shared purpose that helped them face their new abnormal. For me, initially, it was my children. We became Team Tucker and would stick together through our unexpected and uninvited new abnormal. I wonder, what is it for you? What is the anchor that's going to help you navigate your new abnormal? You see, it's critical that we find an anchor, something that can help us continue to put one foot in front of the other as we navigate grief and loss. This is how God enabled me to do this and face the new abnormal, even beginning to find moments of joy and laughter together with the children. I want to read one more story of what happened during that time. On one occasion, we were sitting at the dinner table discussing the changes that had happened in our lives. We weren't falling into melancholic reminiscences. Rather, Team Tucker were processing our new abnormal. The children had all expressed that they felt their relationship with me was changing. I was now more involved in their lives, and obviously, I'd been taking up some of the tasks that their mom had previously done. Although I enjoy cooking, I had previously not cooked every day. Then there was handling the schooling, to which I'd only been a peripheral figure. Another daunting task had been managing the children's social diaries and play dates. This involved interacting with many moms who had complicated algorithms to align their children's schedules. Thankfully, I received some good coaching by some super competent mums. I thought that I had a handle of complex multitasking in my role as a CEO, but it went to another level as I morphed into a new parenting role. At the table, we were laughing about this. I said that the kids needed to come up with a new name for me because there were times I was being more mum than dad. I apologized to my friends who would struggle with these gender stereotypes, but hey, we were in a new abnormal. And there were other times when I was still more dad than mum. So we agreed. When I'm more mum than dad, then they'd call me mad. And when I'm more dad than mum, then they'd call me damn. We then realized how appropriate it was that we had described my disposition in our new abnormal. I am simply damn mad. It's easy to resist the new abnormal and fight it. There are times I wanted to do that. However, in my discombobulated state, I knew that I had to find ways to live in my strange new reality. Just like the friends of Stephen. They faced the reality of their new normal. They faced that grief, they faced that loss, and they found an anchor to navigate it, even though it caused them much pain. They managed to realign their lives to the new reality. And God was able to work through their lives, even in their brokenness. And isn't that an encouraging thought? God, in His grace, still has a plan and purpose for our life, in whatever new abnormal we might be facing.
Sheena and I, we were married for 43 years. I have 2 children and 3 grandchildren. And she passed on the 6th of February, and that was like 5 years ago. I think initially it was anger because, being in the ministry, you fast, you pray, you trust God, and then you believe God. And then this thing happens, and so I think the very first day after she's gone, I almost had a fight with the Lord. I said, why? I've trusted you. God said to me, well, she's more healthier. She's actually more alive. I have answered your prayer. I am not a person that could cook well. In fact, I can't cook. And so, I spotted with some people that asked me, and I was cooking. I said, well, Sister Woolies is looking after me. Sister Woolworths is looking after me. So I would buy food. And some people would bring me food. And then, of course, they would leave. And I think the hardest thing is to have your meal on your own. And your tears falling into your food. So that was very tough. And of course, I am the minister of the church, so I still had to deal with that community as well. So there was a grieving going on that I just didn't fully understand. And there were a few things that I considered even not pastoring a church anymore. But I told my son, he said, no, Dad, you can't do that. But those are the things that, because you're always thinking about tomorrow. And then you try to put it out, and you deal with the present reality. Yeah. So I had to plunge it because I begin to realize now I'm possibly going to, whatever decision I'm going to take and make at that given time was the wrong decision. And a lot of soul searching, of course, and a lot of communicating with God and the Word. To those that are going through similar challenges, I want to say to them, grieve, cry. You don't have to rush in doing even your administration. Take your time, and it's normal. You're human. And I realize that I have to go through this grief. There's no way past that. The only way to overcome grief is to go through it. There is after this. There's life after death. There's life after whatever pain you're going through. And just keep on looking to Him because He's the author and He's the finisher. So He's writing our script, He's writing our story, and we need to submit to that. And you'll laugh again. Weeping is enduring for a night, and that night can be long, but joy comes in the morning.
Sometimes just having the right language to express what we're going through can be really helpful. If you are facing a new abnormal, I pray that this series is helping you find courage and hope for the journey ahead. Please remember Tim's book, Grief and Grace, is available on Kindle, details on the screen. Please join us next week.